It's a money fight, I get you, and you want to make money. But at some point in time, if you keep telling us that you're taking boxing seriously and you want to be recognized as a big-time boxer/fighter, you're going to have to fight somebody closer to your age, who is a contender at the very least.
Announcement, another circus act, another clown show. A fight between Jake Paul and Gervonta Tank Davis has been announced as an exhibition fight.
I couldn't believe that was too insane and honestly just baffling to think would be a real fight in 2025. Remind you that combat sports are the craziest sports on.
Stephen A. Smith did not hold back on the announcement of the Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis fight, calling it nothing short of a circus. He acknowledged Jake Paul's ability to promote himself and turn fights into spectacles, but stressed that boxing deserves better. According to him, Jake should at least face fighters who make sense as matchups rather than chasing shock value.
I've been a fan of Jake because I think that what Jake tries to do for the sport of boxing, I think people don't realize the importance of him being able to promote for himself and not being reliant on the promoters who I believe has held the sport hostage. The only critique I've ever given Jake, I just want Jake to fight boxers. Like Nate Diaz, we know his reputation. We know the man can fight. We know in the octagon he could be something special. But we know you breathe on him, he starts bleeding.
It's a fair critique. And you know what? He should fight boxers. But then again, should he? Because I'll tell you why. If you're a human who can rake in $6 to $10 million fighting people that you know you're going to beat, and you want to build a resume and a record that's impressive with a good highlight reel, you got to be strategic about this shit. Jake's 25, 26. He's got so much time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, I get where you coming from. All I'm saying is, we don't know your skill set because you haven't been in there with anybody.
For Smith, this fight highlighted entertainment over true competition. Analysts argue that Jake Paul's latest matchup is just another circus act in his boxing journey. They believe most of his fights lack any real logic or competitive balance, often designed more for attention than sporting credibility. Instead of testing himself against opponents who make sense stylistically or in weight class, Jake continues choosing unusual fights. To many experts, this pattern makes his bouts entertaining spectacles, but not serious boxing contests.
Jake Paul won the fight. But yeah, that was that. This time, Jake Paul is to take on Tank Davis. Tank Davis, he was recently in the news for being arrested for a domestic violence incident involving one of his kids' mother. He was alleged to have slapped her about the place. The charges were later dropped, to be fair to him. But yeah, that was when he was last in the news. What is interesting is just a couple of months ago, Tank Davis was saying openly that he'd lost his passion for boxing and that he wanted time away from the sport. There was speculation that he might even retire as he was experiencing extreme mental fatigue from boxing, depression, and there were mental health concerns over him. However, I guess the opportunity to earn a truck full of money, fighting a completely worthless exhibition fight against Jake Paul, was enough to make him change his mind about boxing. Funny that, isn't it? But you know what? I'm not even going to waste your time or mine critiquing this utter nonsense. Suffice to say that this so-called fight we're talking about is an exhibition, and it pits Jake Paul, who is a cruiserweight, by the way, weighs in excess of 200 pounds, and Tank Davis, who is, he was the WBA lightweight champion, who weighs in at about 135 pounds when he fights. So that's a disparity of some 65 pounds. In old money, that's about 4.5 stone. There's also a significant difference in height. Jake Paul is roughly, 6'1", 2. Gervonta Davis is 5'5" at best. So, there's a height disparity there of some.
Ring Magazine tweeted the stunning news that has the boxing world buzzing. Breaking Jake Paul will face Gervonta Tank Davis on November 14th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta in an exhibition live on Netflix. Sources confirmed to Mike Carpenter. Talks for Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Paul's last fight took place at 200 pounds, while Davis is a champion at 135. This unexpected matchup has fans debating size differences, entertainment value, and the surprising twist boxing continues to deliver.
We've seen that Jake will kind of bounce in between doing these entertainment fights and then, trying to push toward his goal of ingraining himself in the sport of boxing, and kind of does both of them. So it's kind of a weird place to be, because he wants the respect of the boxing fans and the boxing hierarchy and hardcore boxing people, but at the same time, he'll gain some of that and then lose some of it. It's like a seesaw of his fights. Like one fight, and be like, okay, that's a real fight, or that's a real fighter. And he'll go and he'll win the fight. Julio Cesar Chavez, real fighter, maybe past his prime, whatever, but Jake goes and wins that fight pretty easily, and then gets a lot of respect, gets a lot of the boxing hardcore love. And you have these talks about him fighting Anthony Joshua, and that was going to get even more respect. More people were like, that's fucking crazy. What are you doing? Myself included. That seemed like a massive risk, but a lot of people were like, okay, fair play. Anthony Joshua, that's a real heavyweight. Jake wants to fight him. He's a psycho, but fair play. And then you announce this one, and it's like, well, that's the same thing people have been saying about Jake for years, so it's a weird spot to be in for him for sure. But I talked about this not being the first choice, and I don't think it was, because Coppinger reports next that talks for Jake Paul to face Anthony Joshua collapsed over network issues. Now, we had all heard the talks, and they were pretty public, from Eddie Hearn, from Jake. Nakisa Badarian, Jake's manager, was over in the UK on, I think, Sky Sports, talking about the fight and saying how it was a real possibility and they were really starting to work on it. And now Mike Coppinger says that the talks for Jake and Joshua fell apart over...
Jake Paul has been pushing his own agenda in boxing, determined to turn his wild goal into reality by investing his own money and creating buzz. He has managed to shake up the sport in ways few imagined. While many dismiss his approach as unorthodox, others see it as beneficial, since his financial muscle brings attention and new audiences to boxing. This latest matchup, which nobody thought would ever happen, proves how far he's willing to go.
Why? He's done a hell of a job to put himself in this position. He sold himself. He sold his dream. He took his dream. He took his idea. And he put it out there, and he made it happen. Give him credit for that. And he made it happen. And he took risk along the way. Yeah, he picked his spots. He's in the driver's seat. He gets to pick his spots. He's the one bringing the money. He's the one promoting. Yeah, he's the name. He made himself that, coming from where he came from, with all his followers and the whole thing, and just the uniqueness of what he was doing. But he has learned along the way. He's not a top guy yet. No, I don't know that he ever will be. He didn't have that amateur background and the things that you usually need to be a top guy. But he has improved. He is a work in progress. He is a guy that you got to give him credit that he's respected the sport. He went out there, he's worked hard at it, and he's gotten himself into this position. Having said all of that, this might be a step too far. Now, when I say it, I'm also, I try to be responsible. I've been in this game 50 years, so I know where not to step, where you could twist an ankle, or worse, you could break a leg or fall down. When I say that with the understanding, too, that Joshua's coming off being knocked out.
Later, Jake Paul also confirmed the fight through his Instagram writing. Size versus speed, power versus precision. One will rise and one will fall from Atlanta. Live globally only on Netflix Friday, November 14th. His post fueled even more excitement, making the exhibition a major talking point worldwide. Teddy Atlas, a highly respected voice in boxing, has spoken openly about Jake Paul's rise and the sacrifices behind it.
And that's probably where the problem was. So I think that fight is sort of like dead and buried in the water. And we get Gervonta Davis, man, like you guys said it. He's a 135-pound world champion, lightweight world champion. The guy's my height. He's 5'5". And Jake Paul is a cruiserweight. He walks around at sort of like 15 stone. So, and it's an exhibition. So look, if you buy into that, then yeah, fine. But it's not one for me.
Spence, let me ask you this: if you were European champion, right?
Yes.
Before you had to retire, sadly, you were European champion. If you were, how tall are you? What are you at? 4'8", 4'9"?
5'5".
5'5". Okay. If you were in your pomp at European champion and you were 5'5", and you were fighting Jake Paul, would you fancy your chances?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, definitely. I think I fancy my chances. I think Javante Davis actually beats him as well. He's one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world at lightweight. But it's a bit of it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It's like you got a guy of 5'5" boxing a guy of 6 foot plus. Cruiserweight. Yeah, it's just all a little bit odd. I feel if they're going to do an exhibition, perhaps Jake should have picked someone more his size. Look, his last fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Was at cruiserweight. Chavez Jr. was a former world champion at middleweight himself, and that sort of made sense. And it was a good win for Jake Paul. You know, he come out there and he beats an ex-world champion. He gets a little bit of credibility, and you go.
He acknowledges that regardless of how critics feel, Paul deserves credit for managing to secure the fights he wants. In Atlas's view, this is not something that just happens. It takes persistence, investment, and a willingness to sacrifice stability for the spotlight. Paul has carved a space in boxing that nobody thought possible for a YouTuber turned fighter. Atlas also pointed out that Jake has genuinely improved his boxing ability. He has put in years of training with top coaches.
For Javante as much as it is for Jake. Jake, it's like, okay, you're fighting a former world lightweight champion. You're bigger, so you have some advantages, even if you're, at a severe skill disadvantage. You're not supposed to expect to do anything, but if you do, it's even, it's bananas for you. It's great. Javante, I don't know. What if Jake hits him? Jake's a big guy. I don't know if Javante stood next to Jake. Jake's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
And Javante is small even by lightweight standards.
Right.
So it is a little bit of a David and Goliath fight. It's just, the David character in Javante is much, much more skilled. But I guess that's the thought process. As far as what it does for boxing, well, absolutely nothing. But then again, what have Javante Davis and Jake Paul really done for boxing in the ring aspect? Because Jake, I am a believer in Jake as a promoter, and I think that he has a future as a promoter, and I think he's done very well as a promoter, and I think his company has done some very good things for the sport, and for young fighters, and for brewing talent and making good fights on that basis. But as far as from fighters' perspective, what they do for boxing from a fighter's perspective, I don't think Javante Davis has ever done anything for boxing, honestly. Like I feel like TV has just in this generation, they just create stars, and then they just tell you, okay, we're gonna make this guy the star. It's like they're pre-created, and then they just tell.
Spar with professional fighters and learn to handle himself in the ring. While purists may mock him, Atlas suggests the criticism often ignores the effort and results Paul has shown. Many fans dismiss him because of his background, but Atlas insists that Jake's journey is proof of how much he has invested to reach this point. The team at Talk Sports reacted strongly to the news of Jake Paul versus Gervin Davis.
This had been being talked about even prior to the Lamont Roach fight. I thought it was so utterly ridiculous, especially that you've essentially manufactured Javante into a star without really having him fight any major threats in his career, I know the groupies are gonna say somebody like saying, well, if Leo Santa Cruz is the biggest name on your resume, you got a problem. Like Santa Cruz was probably dying shot by the time before Javante Davis. Santa Cruz, who 90% of his own resume was against guys you never heard of, and again, it was a one directional fighter who started at bantamweight and they fought at 130. That's your best win. Pedraza's a solid win, I thought, even though it was a weight drain Pedraza, and Pedraza was so weight drained that he'd actually already lost to Edna Cherry and should have already not been champion by the time Javante fought him, but they robbed Edna Cherry in that IBF title defense of Jose Pedraza, so that Pedraza remained champion. I remember because I worked that show and commentated that fight. So it's a sneaky good win, but it's sort of below the radar, not that good of a win. He had a weight drain Pedraza who went up to lightweight and actually fought better once he didn't have to weight drain himself, and who had been struggling already at 130 prior to being knocked out by Davis. Like I said, he'd already lost to Cherry and was lucky to keep the title in the Cherry fight at 130. So Cherry, mind you, a guy that I beat way back in the day. I don't know. It's I beat him easily, like 9 out of 10 rounds, 10 out of 10 rounds, something like that. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this, man. I sure as hell love to hear the comments. It's gonna generate curiosity for sure. Jake Paul is huge. I mean, this is like, he's going to be almost a foot bigger than Javante Davis. This is an exhibition, so there's not going to be an official winner unless there's a stoppage. So things like glove size, ring size still has to be dictated and figured out. I don't know. I don't know what you do with this. I don't know what boxing's coming to. This is what happens when you manufacture a star instead of letting stars organically create themselves.
Branding it a completely unbalanced matchup. Their main point of concern is the massive weight disparity. Davis, a natural 135 pounds lightweight, has dominated his division with knockout power. But stepping up against Paul, who walks around at 195 pounds, seems unrealistic to them. The question arises, how can this be a fair or meaningful fight when the size difference is so extreme? This reaction highlights a recurring criticism of Paul's fight selection. Many argue that he chooses opponents who are either much smaller, past their prime, or coming from outside boxing. In this case, Davis may be at the peak of his career, but he is significantly undersized compared to Jake.